So, Jennifer, you are one of our rare guests who was born and raised in Kelowna. So, what was it like growing up here? And tell us about some of the changes you've seen.
Oh, Kelowna was so tiny, and as a young child, it was such a incredibly free childhood. We would literally get on our ponies and gallop around the orchards in those days.
Wow.
And then if we got hot, we would ride the ponies all the way down to Gyro Beach and go for a swim. That's how free and easy it was. There was very little traffic. Gordon Drive did not exist. It was a dead-end road right at the Kelowna Riding Club. It was so rural and magical, and I feel so thankful to have grown up in such a magical time. But as a teenager, of course, you know, your values change a little bit, and I grew to not love Kelowna so much. It was, to me, it was really small town. I was restless to do something more, see something more. And actually, I did go away for a little while. I think it is going away that makes you realize what a gem you have. So, because I mentioned ponies already, I was really into horses and equestrian. I had the opportunity to go to an equestrian school. And so I did go away to Queen Margaret's School, it's called. It's an equestrian school on Vancouver Island. And I remember the first holiday back. No, not the first. It would have been the second year coming home, I think, for Christmas break. And I don't recall where it was, but I remember being able to buy a cappuccino in Kelowna. And I was so excited. I thought, oh my gosh, Kelowna has arrived. We can get a cappuccino here.
So what would happen if someone tried to take a pony to the beach today?
It would be so dangerous. I mean, just the volume of people, so much traffic. Plus, I'm pretty sure there's regulations against that now. You know, with traffic, with increase in population, obviously comes rules and regulations. Otherwise, it would be complete chaos.
Right.
If my children asked to ride their horses to the lake, it would be a resounding absolutely not, just because it would be so dangerous.
Yeah.
So I feel sorry for them in a way, in that Kelowna has become bigger, busier. Children now, their childhood is very organized, very scheduled, and we get them to their activities. And I mean, honestly, I would say goodbye to my mom in the morning, and she wouldn't see me until after dark sometimes, because we'd be riding up in the mountains. Just above the winery and the vineyard is the South Slopes Provincial Park. It's now a provincial park. In those days it wasn't. It was just the bush, crown land basically. And literally we'd put a little backpack on our backs and off we'd go. Bye, Mom. You know, they'd start to worry if we were not home, you know, 15 minutes after dark, then they'd start to worry. But it was so free. It was so wonderful.
I have a friend who used to go in those same areas, and they had a sighting while they were in there. Did you ever encounter something that was unexplained in that area?
Like
interesting.
What? Like a
They
ghost?
swear they saw the Sasquatch. They swear. There's no way we can explain it. They had footprints. They're like, to this day they swear that.
Well, we used to talk about that and scare ourselves and pretend we saw, you know, Sasquatch feet in the mud at Lost Lake. I don't know if you've been to Lost Lake. It's a little gem of a lake just up past here. If you hiked for about an hour and a half, you'd get there. It's just this little lake, this little pond essentially, with a cliff on one side, and it's unfortunately the Okanagan Mountain Fire, when it came across, burned that whole area. So the last time I actually rode my horse up there, I hadn't been for several years, and I burst into tears. It was so upsetting. It was such an idyllic, amazing place. Our teacher in grade 4 at Little South Kelowna Elementary, Mr. Bob Hewitson, that's who I should nominate. He's the most incredible, inspiring educator ever. I had him for grade 4 and grade 6 at Little South Kelowna Elementary School. And talk about free, things being so free in those days. He walked us. We hiked up to Lost Lake, so we all had our sleeping bags and our tents, and we was with the kids. It was a couple-hour hike at least, and then he camped with all of us, grade 4 and in grade 6 again. We did it 2 years, and we camped around Lost Lake. That was really magical.
That's great.
Yeah.
Was it here on this vineyard that you grew up?
Yeah, yes and no. We spent a lot of time here because the old farmhouse, which is right beside the winery, that's where my Nana Turton grew up. My Uncle Ted raised my cousins in that house. So, of course, in those days, you played with the people on your street, or in our case, we didn't really have a street, so you played with the people in the next property or farm, or your cousins. So I was always here on this property with my cousins, and zipping up and down Ward Road on our bikes and playing in the dirt. And the clay in this, the lower part of our orchard has really crazy clay, which makes this most incredible dust. And in the summertime, when you're kids, when it's dry, when it's really hot in the summer, we would go out there on our bare feet and go choo, 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 and we'd run through the dirt, pushing it with our toes, and billows of dust would come up. We hate that clay now. Like, now that we're trying to farm this land more seriously, it's just like, oh, stop raining. It just turns into this total gumbo mess. But luckily, it's only at the bottom part of the property. The rest is nice and sandy, which is what grapes like. So, yeah.
So you're fifth generation here at this vineyard.
Yeah, so my Nana, Nana Turton, Doris Turton was her married name.
Grandma.
Yeah, we call her Nana. That's sort of the British thing. So her father came from Birmingham. And he came here, I think I think it was around the time she was born. So, 1910, 1911, he came from Birmingham, England. And he actually purchased a property in Glenmore. Talk about gumbo soil, horrible soil, he realized after a while. And so he then purchased, she was born in 1911 on that property. And she speaks of taking the wagon into town with Daddy. And he had 5 kids, imagine that. Anyhow, then they moved on to this property in 1918. It was much better for growing apples, and we've been here ever since.
Do you know much of the history? So when did it change from apples to wine?
Yeah, I do. So in those days, my great-grandfather Ward planted primarily apples, but there were also some stone fruits. There was some plums, there was some peaches, there was some cherries, and then... the land then went into my great-uncle's names, Uncle Harry and Uncle Arthur, and they farmed the land for quite a while until they were elderly. And then my dad, Chris Turton, and his brother, Ted, so Uncle Ted, they had a contracting company, actually, as youngsters. They built houses, Cedarwood Homes. And so I'm not sure, but I think the deal was they basically built a home for Uncle Art and Uncle Harry, and then the land kind of transferred into their name. I'm sure there was some cash exchanged as well, but in those days probably not as much. So now it's in my father and my uncle's names, and then there was a little bit of a change in ownership. I think maybe, doing business with brothers is not always easy. It's complicated. So there was just some transition there. And my uncle was not involved anymore. So my father took over sole ownership. And it was about around 1998 that Howard Soon, who is, as you know, a master winemaker from Kelowna Wine, Sandhill fame, he approached my father, and he was such a huge advocate for the whole grape industry or wine industry in those days. And he said, you know what, you guys have been growing amazing fruit for decades on this plot of land. I know this would be a great spot for some cool climate grapes. Will you grow some for us? So they commissioned us to grow Gewürztraminer and Ehrenfelser, all good, German-sounding grapes. They're really good for the cool climate. And Optima, which, if we had known anything really about growing wine grapes, we would not have put the Optima in.
Why is that?
Oh my God. That grape is such a pain in the neck. We've since pulled it out just a few years ago and replaced it with Pinot Noir. It's very prone to mildew and botrytis. Very tight clusters, so not great airflow, thin skin, and when you get mildew and botrytis in a vineyard, it's really hard to control. So basically, it spreads. The little spores. As soon as the wind blows, the spores are just out they go. And eventually, that block was kind of in the middle of our vineyard. So the spores would just go into all of the other blocks and infect them as well. So it was just a nightmare. super high labor. You'd have to really, really take care of it well to minimize the mildew or pour chemicals all over it, which isn't great and expensive.
Yeah. Did you know right away that it was coming from the grapes?
I would say it was a few years into it.
Yeah.
And Howard soon made some great wines with it. He did some late harvest Optima and won awards, and he did well. But once we started sort of learning a bit more about the vineyards and taking them over ourselves, we just realized, man, this grape is not worth the trouble. It's just a real problem child, really. So we yanked it out and put in Pinot Noir, which I'm pretty excited about.
Pinot Noir grows really well here.
Yeah, it grows so well here.
You weren't able to use the botrytis to your...
We did botrytis-affected wines.
Yeah?
Yeah, we did. And they were delicious. But again, it's just...
it's a lot of labor.
It's a lot of labor, and I think if you were going to do that, you'd have the block off by itself and make sure that it's on the downwind side instead of the upwind side where the spores are blowing all over the place.
And what is botrytis for those of us who don't know?
There's another name for botrytis. It's noble rot. Yeah,
Noble rot.
yeah, and it's actually a fungus basically that gets into the grape, and
it affects the flavor.
Yeah, it perforates the skin of the grape, and it almost makes it raisin up. And so when you try a botrytis-affected wine, it does have some lovely flavors of date and raisin, and that can be lovely, and it can be paired with some great food items. But it's just not really, it's not a high volume wine. It's not one. I mean, you may have a dessert wine or a botrytis affected wine on a special occasion, but it's not kind of something you're going to open every day. Typically, it's quite sweet. So it just wasn't the right wine for us. It wasn't the right grape for us, which we learned after. The learning curve was pretty huge. We had been an apple growing family forever, and so sort of learning about how to grow the grapes properly took a little while, for sure.
Very different from apples.
Very different from apples. Yeah.
You don't have to worry about botrytis of apples.
No, you don't. No.
There's other ones, but not.
So around that same time, my father, he was putting in grapes anyhow for Howard Soon, and his dream was to plant some Pinotage. He had really close friends in South Africa and had fallen in love with the grape in South Africa. So everyone thought he was crazy. What? Pinotage? That's a South African grape. Why would you bring it here? And that's the kind of thing that just makes my dad, more convinced he has to do something, as if if people say he can't or shouldn't.
Yeah.
So he popped some vines in the ground, and they were winter hardy. And later, upon more sort of research, we found out that Pinotage is related to Pinot Noir, which is a cool climate grape. So actually, in hindsight, it was a really great choice for this area, and it's super early ripening, which is what we need up here. Like it gets hot, and we have the light units, but we have definitely a shorter growing season. So whatever we grow, it's got to ripen on time. Spring comes just a little bit later, winter comes just a little bit earlier. So if you don't have a grape that's going to ripen in time, it's sitting out there in the vines when the vines go dormant. And if it doesn't have enough sugar and if the acid hasn't come down, what are you going to do with it?
Right.
So we really are very much aware of that, and we plant according grapes that fit our terroir. So Pinot Noir does, Pinotage, and then a lot of whites. So when people come here to taste at the winery and they say, I only drink red, I'm like, well, today you might have to try some whites. We only make wine out of what we grow, and we only grow what's really appropriate for the terroir.
Right.
So primarily whites.
So 1998, you start transitioning away from apples into grapes.
Yeah.
And did you pull the apple trees out?
We did.
At that time?
Yes, some of them.
You were instantly.
Yes. So for those blocks, we pulled the apples out, prepared the blocks, and popped the grapes in. And then right around that same time is when we started transitioning from apples grown for the fresh market to apples grown specifically for making cider. So my father put some cider apples in the ground. The cider industry, the apple industry had definitely been going through some hard times in this valley. A lot of growers losing money, and my dad was a pretty smart guy. He kind of saw the writing on the wall, and he thought, well, we need to diversify here a little bit. We need to find another use for these apples. So he got into the cider game. And not so much here. He didn't start our own Ward's label here, but he had a distributor in Washington that was really interested in his product, and so Ward's cider originally was launched in Washington.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's why it's called Ward's Hard Cider, because in those days, although Washington had a lot of apples, They didn't have cider really, or apple cider to them meant apple juice. Yes.
Right.
So the original label had to be Ward's Hard Apple Cider, so people recognized, oh, this has got alcohol in it. They're not feeding it to their kids for breakfast.
Do you still make it?
Yes. So Ward's label has taken off in a huge way, and we have quite a large portfolio now. Ward's Hard Apple, Ward's Ginger Apple, Ward's Cherry Apple, and then we have a whole line of craft bomber bottles, the Pickers Hut line, Winter Spice. We do a sangria cider.
Wow.
And the last one that we've just released is called Frostbite, and it's a dry hopped cider. It's delicious.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So when did you start to get interested in the wine business? I believe you took over in 2006.
Yeah, so in 2006, my father had actually started the the cider project with another winery. And that winery, for various reasons, was not able to continue. So now the label is taking off, and there's nowhere to make the cider. So cider is made under the same license as a winery license. It basically is wine. It's just made from apples. You call it cider. And so here you have a label that's taking off, a product that's doing well in the marketplace. You have the apples that are there, and my father would press the apples here and make apple juice, but then he would ship it to the other winery, and under their winery manufacturing license, they'd make the cider there. So he approached me and basically said, look, we need to save this cider project. You need to get us a license on the family land, like stat.
And what were you doing at that time?
Oh, nothing. I just had 2 young babies, and I was teaching.
So you said drop everything and come out.
He said, you've got time. I actually, to be honest, I wasn't teaching full time. I was job sharing at the time because I did have 2 young children, and I'm a person that loves to be busy, so bring it on. Here we go. Let's do this.
Were you excited?
Super excited. So excited because my background, I've always been passionate about food and wine, culinary, and I was actually, my husband and I had planned on opening our own boutique winery eventually, but we were thinking, that'll be a fun project when we're retired type thing. And I think my dad had caught wind of that. I think we probably shared that with him, which is probably why he thought, I should get Jennifer involved, She's already expressed some interest. So he came to me and said, can you get this license? And dealing with the government and bureaucracy is never simple, but it was really interesting. It was a big learning curve, and they fast-tracked our license for us because he came to me at the end of the summer, basically, midsummer, and we didn't have anyone to make. We were going to be squishing the apples in a few months and had nowhere to make the cider. So everything was fast-tracked. It was just a blur. And then, now you have to find a winemaker, essentially, to make the cider. And I'll be honest, in those days, cider wasn't that popular. There weren't a lot of good craft ciders on the market. A lot of them were kind of like growers and, large sort of commercial poppy style. So it was really hard to find a winemaker. So it's funny how it all just worked out. In order to find a winemaker to make the cider, I had to promise them that we would have a premium wine label as well. Because winemakers really, they're interesting. It's not just a job to them. They want to be a part of something. They want to be a part of something special. And because cider wasn't that well respected back then, I couldn't find anyone that just wanted to come and just make the cider. So I had to promise them that, we're going to have a wine label as well. I think it's a little bit like in those days perceived as almost like asking an artist to paint a fence. Kind of the same skills, but not quite as inspiring. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? So the cider I couldn't get anyone who was inspired by the cider project. But when I said, okay, and we're going to make some great wines and look at the beautiful grapes we already have in the ground. So by now the grapes are mature. And so I was able to attract some great people. And they saw my vision. They were on side with my dad's vision. And we did keep the cider secret. Like as far as the 2 brands, not secret, but very separate from our wine label. Because the wine label was very personal to me. It was a bit glitzy, glammy, a little bit geared towards the female demographic. And then the cider is Ward's cider. It's kind of masculine. And I just couldn't see a way to fit the 2 together. Yeah. And because cider wasn't really that popular, I also, I felt like the cider would affect the perceived integrity of the quality of our wines.
Right.
And so I kept them really separate. But then, wouldn't you know it, cider started becoming really popular, and more craft cideries started popping up and making good cider. Mm-hmm. So now the foodies and the critics are starting to say, hey, what's with this, cider movement in the Okanagan and BC? And then it was just, I'm just lucky. Just the timing was right, and we were able to kind of fly our cider flag high. Go, and by the way, we make cider. Oh, and it's part of our heritage. And then it all just kind of came together, and suddenly, tourism Kelowna was all over us. They really embraced us because we're such a unique winery, and we did have that heritage element to us. And so they were hand delivering writers to us, travel writers, lifestyle writers, food writers, and it was so great. It was a huge part of our growth. And so now, as you see, when you look around the wine shop, it's kind of an eclectic wine shop, but it does have sort of the female glitzy, glammy feel combined with the rustic old packing house charm. It feels right, though. It's kind of the shabby chic thing.
Yeah.
And I also just feel lucky about that, too. I think the whole shabby chic movement has also happened around the same time. So, it's just like serendipity in so much of what's gone on with people always say, you're so amazing. Wow, look what you've done. And I think, you know what? I've just been pretty darn lucky.
Yeah.
Obviously, timing was great. I guess I'm just a person that's able to kind of connect the dots a bit, and the dots were there, and I just kind of went, let's connect them, and here we go. And,
so to be clear, that was 2006.
Yeah, so our first vintage was actually, our first wine vintage was 2007.
Okay, so what happened between 98 and 2007?
So then, we were just growing grapes for Howard Soon, and then we actually grew grapes for Summerhill Winery. We grew grapes for, in the day, Lang Vineyards. Mm-hmm. And so essentially we were growers.
Right.
And then my father had already started the cider label, but with another company, and that was down in the U.S., so it wasn't really a thing yet. And when I started this building, I don't know how many farmers you know, but farmers are very thrifty, and they don't throw anything away because you never know. You might need it.
Right.
So honestly, this building was bulging at the seams with stuff.
Like old equipment?
Old equipment, but even old office equipment. We had printers, from the 1970s and 80s, of course, because it was quite it was a real thriving fruit company in its day, and it had my dad had an office and had office staff, and so, but they didn't throw anything away. There was, the old style printers, the ones that would sort of have the paper on the little, I don't know what you call that.
Dot matrix.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I think there was like 4 or 5 of those back there. There was a big Xerox printer, old tractors, old cars, just everything. Every room was full, floor to ceiling, with stuff. Old records, that was kind of neat going through all those. Old ledgers, just old stuff. So we've polished up some of the artifacts that were, kind of charming, and we thought we got to keep these. And the rest of it, hopefully my dad's not listening to this, but it kind of went to the dump.
Right. So you've cleaned it up. You've kind of got it organized.
Yeah.
You introduced several wine labels.
Yeah.
What other accomplishments would you say you've done since 2006 and you started working? Was it full-time for you?
Yeah, it was. Well, I'll be honest.
Away?
I kept my teaching job. It's when you already have a career that you've, worked hard, and a couple of degrees under my belt, and I loved teaching. I was really passionate about it. Mm-hmm. I wasn't sure this was going to fly, I'll be honest, so I was scared to jump right into the deep end. So I kept my teaching job for at least a year and a half. I had 2 young children under the age of 5. I also had an equestrian business at the time. I was teaching riding lessons. And I didn't really have a staff in those days, so I was basically making the wine with the winemaker and doing the sales and marketing and logistics and everything. I was doing everything, and my husband basically just said, you know what? Something's got to go here. So gave all my equestrian clients to another trainer, stopped teaching riding lessons and doing that. gave up my teaching job. I'll never forget that phone call to the superintendent of hiring, and I said, look, I need to do this. This is starting to take off, and it needs all of my attention.
Yeah.
He actually had a huge family, I think 5 or 6 kids, and he said, I know what it's like to be busy, Jennifer. Maybe you should reconsider, think about this. And, are you sure? And I did. I thought about it overnight, and then I called back, and I just said, no, I'm sorry. I'm doing this. I love it. I was really hooked when our winemaker made our first Gewürztraminer. And one of the funnest parts of my job is when the winemakers hand you, they go into a phase of the winemaking called the blending trials, essentially. And so what they do is that because we have small tanks, everything's small lots, then they sort of blend the different tanks. They might all be the same varietal, like they might all be Gewürztraminer, but they blend them. And then they give you 4 bottles, 4 samples, and you're supposed to take them home and try them with friends and try them with food and then give them feedback and essentially let them know which your favorite blend was. And I remember squealing with delight that night at home in our living room with my friends and my husband, and we tried our first sip of the Gewürztraminer. I was completely blown away by the quality, and I was enamored. Like, okay, I'm done. Sorry, I love teaching, but no, here we go. This is so great.
That's exciting.
It was really exciting.
Do you remember what you had to eat that night?
Pretty sure we were having Indian. Yeah, we were. Yeah, my husband loves to make Indian food. My husband's a great cook. Thank God. He's the only reason, actually, that I was able to do all of this. He really is incredible dad, incredible cook. He's so inspiring and so supportive. And when I get really grumpy and down, he boots me out the door and says, "Go ride your horse."
And you still have a horse.
I do, yeah. He's the love of my life, except for Kent, my husband. His name's Lazaro. Yeah,
and
he's
do you
beautiful.
have Lazaro around here?
So that's an interesting question, because we had ridden on this property so much as children and had such fond memories galloping around between the orchard rows. I thought, I have to bring Lazaro here. So my girlfriend, Barb Hill, and her family's been here also for at least 5, maybe 6 generations. Wallace Hill Road, that's named after her family.
Okay.
Yeah, so she and I used to ride together as kids. So we still ride together. And we decided to ride the horses to the vineyard, which is a bit of a ride from our house. We now are living up on June Springs Road, right at the base of the South Slopes Provincial Park. And so we got to the vineyard, and we thought, oh, God, this is going to be so romantic. We're going to gallop through the vines, and we had our cameras. The colors were so pretty. Well, what I'd forgotten is we put reflectors out to keep the birds away. The horses were not impressed. We came over the crest of the hill, and we sort of looked at the vineyard, and my friend Barb and I are going, wow. And all the horses just went, and I mean, they're well-trained horses, so they kind of did, we got them far enough into the vineyard that we snapped off a few photos, but basically it was a huge disappointment. They did not want to gallop. They did not want to have fun in the vineyard. They wanted to go home. They're like, yeah, we're done with this. We don't like all these things flying around the vineyard catching their eye, because horses are flight and fright animals, so anything that sort of catches their attention but they don't understand what it is gets their adrenaline going. And then once their adrenaline gets going, they're not having fun, they're not really listening to you. So sadly we had to turn around and come home. So if we do it next year, we'll do it before we put the bird reflectors out.
So I moved here just over 10 years ago, and one of the first things I saw on Facebook was a clip of you talking about your winery. And it was still newish at that point. It was only a year old or 2 years, and the red shoe.
Oh yeah, the red shoe. That's another crazy thing that just kind of happened. I just feel so fortunate in life. So it's a pretty hard thing developing a label. I mean, you really have to think about, who are we appealing to? What do we want to say? How are we representing ourselves? So I have to say, we went pretty mamby-pamby the first effort. We just kind of wanted to fit in, I guess, which is so stupid, because in business it's never smart to just fit in. But I guess we wanted somehow we wanted to fit in. So our first label was very in keeping with the idea of the view. So it was the view. It was an artist's sketch of the view from the top of the vineyard with the lake and the mountains and behind. It was just beautiful, but it was so stinking boring. And, we never really felt that great about it. And luckily, we weren't in a hurry. I don't remember the exact timeline, but we didn't have to go to print right away. And we were invited to a big wine tasting through the BC Wine Institute. It's like 200 people there. And the fellow hosting the tasting, David Schofield, who's a specialist in international and British Columbia wines, but he's also a label specialist. So he was talking about what makes a good label and what makes a bad label, and it was very interesting, very timely for us. But honest to God, everything he said about what makes a bad label, he could have held ours up as Exhibit A. Just like all the others, doesn't say anything about you, doesn't evoke emotion of any sort. So Kent and I were kind of kicking each other under the table, going, oh my God, we've got to scrap that label. Like, we just have to. And we were able to, luckily. We had time. The next weekend was our anniversary. And remember, our kids were pretty little at this time. Mm-hmm. So my mom agreed to keep them all night long. She's the best grandma. And so we were really excited about our evening out because we knew we weren't going to be woken up by gremlins in the morning at 5 a.m. going, Mommy, Daddy.
Sleeping a little bit.
Could sleep in a little bit. So we really went out. We took a cab and had a few bottles of wine before dinner. Had a great dinner at, why am I forgetting the name of it right now? What was the predecessor to Rod's?
Oh, I forgot. I've only been here 7 years.
Same owners even. So stupid. I'm just having a brain block. But anyhow, Rod's restaurant, basically. But it wasn't Rod's in those days. We had an amazing meal with a couple bottles of wine. And then just down the street's the Blue Gator, which in those days was a bit of a dive, but they had a really great band playing. Okay, maybe it is. I haven't been for a while. But they had an amazing blues band playing. Mm-hmm. So we went and danced like crazy. Well, I had made the really silly mistake of wearing my brand new red stilettos, which I was totally in love with. They were so beautiful. But they had quite a heel on them. They were so sexy. I loved those shoes. Our beagle puppy has since chewed the toe off one of them. But anyhow. So I was wearing the red stilettos, and when we got home, I had such sore feet, and I ended up getting a great foot rub. And Kent, who's really a funny guy, he's just always cracking jokes and always doing silly stuff. He grabbed my red stiletto and popped it in our empty wine bottle from a few hours earlier, and we both looked at it and went, now that a pretty great image. I know it's 3:30 in the morning and we've probably had too much wine, but I think that's a good image. So we took a photo of it. I don't think it was a very good photo given how much wine we'd had, but anyhow, we took it to Julia Trops at Rotary Centre for the Arts, and we said, Julia, what do you think of this image? Like, could you make that into a label for us? I said, I kind of like Impressionist style art. Like, what do you think? She said, leave it with me. And honestly, she had it mocked up within a few days. Like, I think she was excited about it, too. So she showed us the mock-up, and we went, yeah, that's it. I love it.
What a great story.
Yeah. So it became our label. So in the first 2 or 3 vintages, that painting was our label. And then what kind of happened was the red shoe just took on a life of its own. People wouldn't necessarily remember the View Winery, but they would remember that winery with the red shoe, which tells you it's a successful branding, right?
Yes,
then,
definitely.
I don't know how many wine tastings you've been to, but some of the big ones, like the WestJet, are crazy. There's so many wineries, and you don't remember by the end. But I remember it wasn't WestJet; it was People's Choice Awards. I remember hearing some women in the ladies' room at the end of the evening saying, "Oh my God, there's so many wineries. I can't remember any of them. It was so much fun." And then the other woman said, "Yeah, but I remember that one. I really liked that one with the red shoe." And I thought, yes. So, it was great. And then from then on out, I couldn't go anywhere without red footwear on because people would call me out all the time. Where's your red shoes? Awesome. So now I have red Hunters, I have red Vans, I have red boots, red stilettos, red flats, red nail polish. Yeah, I was at the Red Dress Gala last night, so I had to go all red last night. And then... yeah, then it was just lucky, you know. There weren't a lot of female winery proprietors in that era, and media really kind of got excited because we were different. Like, of course, the wine writers or lifestyle writers, it's not always easy to find new, fresh material. So we're like, oh, there's a female doing a winery up here in Kelowna. So we got all sorts of attention. I think it was on the cover of Icon magazine and the cover of Okanagan Woman magazine, and lots of people writing about us. And it was just all so great. And it's like a rock that just starts to build its own momentum, you know. It's like you're pushing it up a hill, and then you kind of get to the top, and then it just starts rolling, and it just really builds its own momentum. And that's sort of where I feel we're at now, which is really so cool. Still have to work it, though. I mean, it's so competitive. When I started the winery, I think there was 156 wineries, and now there's over 300. So
that is a lot.
It's a lot. So it's not. You definitely can't rest on your laurels. You don't just kind of go, okay, everyone knows us now, because it's amazing. You still go out there, especially in Vancouver. You still go to events, and they say, "You're who from where?"
Right.
But more often than not, I get, "Oh, you're from the View. Oh yeah, where are your red shoes?" No.
Well, we'll do our part. We'll keep drinking it. We think it's fantastic.
I appreciate that. And that's what it takes. It takes friends talking about it, serving it in their homes. And I'm so thankful to a lot of the locals that support us and bring their friends. And we keep seeing their faces every year at all the events. And then Bling was a huge thing that really put us on the map as well. Bling's, we were the first winery in Canada to put wine in a can, and so that definitely got a lot of attention in the media. We'd already invested in the canning line for Ward's cider, and so we thought, it's quite a bit of money to buy a canning line. How can we make this thing pay for itself? What other products could we make as well? And so we thought, gosh, does anyone do wine in a can? I know it's done in Europe. And then when I looked into it, I saw Sophia in California, and I'm like, yeah, we need a Sophia up here. And I'm, a female winery proprietor. I've got to be the one to do this. Yeah, Bling. And actually, it was going in the early day. I had one staff member. She's really a super nice woman. She's not here anymore. She's moved on to another city. But my nickname for some reason was Diva. I think it's because I'm not a diva, but she would always call me Diva. I know there was an article in Okanagan Woman magazine, and they said a diva for all seasons. That was the title, and then in the article they really got into the fact that I'm not a diva, and the picture was of me in a red gown with some black rubber boots on in the vineyard, and it was just so telling about my life, right? So I'm so not a diva. I'm out there doing every job there is. So we thought, oh, well, maybe we should just call it Diva. And but Diva was taken. And so I think Bling was about our fourth choice for names. Down the line, we kept going, that one's taken, that one's taken, that one's taken. And I'm just so thankful that it came about, because it's so perfect. Bling is just compared to Diva, it's such a happy connotation. Men like it, women like it. It's fun, and it's just meant to be a fun, easygoing, convenient beverage, so the name really fit. Yeah.
What do you do in the winter time?
So a lot of people think, winter must be your time to relax, but honestly, that's when the wines are being made. So in the cellar, the winter is the busiest time.
So your production is happening.
Yeah, there's a lot of production happening.
Still selling.
And we're still selling, and the neat thing about our wine shop, and I'm so glad it turned out this way, but a lot of wineries make their wine shops very separate from their production area. Obviously, that's a bit easier and more convenient, but ours adjoins our cellar. So I always say to people, if you come up here in the winter, you will see a winemaker working. You might see tanks encapsulated in ice because they're going through cold stabilization. You might see a barrel that's bubbling away because we have some barrel fermentation going on. Like, it's really a good time to wine tour. So we stay open year-round now. And more and more wineries are. I was at a tourism meeting with the Federal Minister of Tourism and Small Business, and she sort of asked around the round table, what's your biggest challenge with doing business in the Okanagan? And everybody, it wasn't just wineries, it was people from all over, all different industries. But I would say 90% of them just said the seasonality of our valley. And those of us that were wineries kind of looked at each other across the table and said, why? Like, we don't have to be seasonal. Why don't people come out to the wineries in the winter?
Sure.
With the exception of maybe some that are really remote, and maybe people don't want to drive. But certainly for the Kelowna wineries, we're right here. sure.
Definitely.
So what we decided was people don't come because they think the wineries are closed. And,
Right.
And the wineries often are closed because people don't come. Right? So it's like
Real
someone's,
estate's
right?
kind of similar. You know, it's a bit of a myth that nobody does anything in the winter. But nobody does anything because they think nobody's doing anything.
Exactly.
There's
so
no real reason
we decided
to
we have
stop.
got to stop this crazy pattern. So we just started opening up. And it wasn't really cost effective in the first days, but sometimes you have to kind of bite the bullet and kind of, go through those growing pains. So what we got creative, and we had our wine shop manager really grew our wine club over winter. So really worked on that. She worked on planning events. We gave her some administrative tasks. So we were able to keep her employed year round. And meanwhile, her office is right beside the wine shop. So she was doing administrative stuff. And if someone happened to come in, hi there, want to do a tasting? So that's how we kind of got over that hump.
Yeah.
Now we're busy enough that we're able to have actual, staff in the shop. And I think you have to have events. So people like Quail's Gate, for instance, they have their Fire and Ice event in the winter. So anything that you can talk about on the radio, that you can talk to people when you're out at other events and say, hey, come to our event on Friday. Anything that drums up a bit of energy around your business is great. So we did the same thing. We copied them a little bit, but we don't have Fire and Ice, but we do Fondue Fridays. And it's affordable as well, which is nice for your locals. $15, come on up, have a fondue, have a tasting. And then we started doing Sip and Slip Saturdays, where you can go with me. So this is part of my exercise, plans. But we go either cross-country skiing or snowshoeing in the vineyard on Saturdays, and then come back for a tasting.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's fun.
Try that.
Yeah,
this year.
Yeah, we're dog friendly. We also do wine and
We
wags.
don't have dogs, but other people do.
And you can just come and enjoy their dogs. It's just the same as enjoying other people's kids, and then you can hand them back after. Yeah, wine and wags really got popular this year. We had huge groups. The weather didn't cooperate in some cases, but we had groups of 30 and 40, and we'd all go for a big hike out in the vineyard with the dogs, and then come back for a tasting. And
that's great.
Yeah.
We're going to put links to all this stuff in the show notes.
Great.
So,
Okay, that's great.
Did you have any other?
No, I already asked.
You already asked the question about the shoe.
Yeah. I knew that was an awesome story.
I think it was that the BC Wine Institute is so amazing. They're so supportive of BC wineries, and they offered us a really great seminar on marketing and shared with us some of the data that they'd collected on, who are we marketing to? I mean, who is coming up here and who isn't coming up here that should be coming up here? And so they did it was a really, really great presentation. But the one thing that really resonated with me are there are people out there that really want to experience things. They're the experiencers. They want to do stuff. So that's really when we got into, let's get people out into the vineyard. Let's let them experience tasting a grape that's not ripe, or maybe tasting a grape that is ripe later in the year. Let's let them touch the plants. Let's let them hike the land. Let's give them these experiences. Let's let them have a picnic out there. Let's let them walk their dogs. And it's been great. It's been really, really fantastic engaging that group of people. And those experiencers, they're the ones that like to meet the winemakers and see the wine being made. And so it just fits with our whole setup as well. We try to be as authentic as possible. Yeah.
Who would you like to nominate to come on the show? You mentioned his name.
Mr. Bob Hewitson. I would love to reconnect with him. And, I've lost touch with him, but I've heard his name mentioned through a few other friends. So just off the top of my head, having that amazing childhood memory that was pulled up there, I thought of him. He's a
what
pretty
does
great
Bob
guy.
do?
Bob Hewitson, he's an educator his whole life. He was the most incredible teacher. He inspired me to go into teaching.
Wow.
So I don't know how he is, and I don't know if he's well or anything, but I could find out for sure.
Sure.
And I know there's others. I just have to I need to kind of percolate a little bit and think about
that's no
who.
problem.
Yeah. I'm pretty, as you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about.
Yes.
Oh, this is my amazing husband Kent. Have you guys met?
Kent. No.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
We haven't. We were talking about you
Is the
earlier.
actual podcast still underway right now?
Yeah, but
Okay.
it's going to be edited. It's not live.
So Luke and Kara.
Hi.
Hi.
Nice to meet you, Luke.
Nice to meet
And
you.
this is Kent, and I was waxing poetic about how we couldn't have done any of this without you. Yeah. Meanwhile, he has a day job. He's well, most of the time that we've had the winery, he has been a journalist with. Were you CTV the whole time? With
Pretty
CTV,
much.
yeah. And now he's with Kelowna now. But in between all that, he does all of our creative. Well, we kind of work together on the creative. It's such a fun thing to do together.
You should nominate your husband.
Yes, I should. Yes, I'm nominating you. There you go.
For what? To be on a podcast?
To be on this, because you are such an
I'm very
interesting
afraid
guy.
of microphones.
You
Are
have-
you? I don't believe it.
That would be really funny because you're always interviewing people. So now someone's going to interview you.
I know it just seems wrong when that happens.
Oh no, I think it would be great, Kara. That's such a brilliant idea.
Well, yeah, we like to do that to people.
Yeah. Yes, I love it. I love that idea. You are the guy that popped the shoe in the bottle after all. So really,
Can't take that away from me.
Well, great to meet you both,
Yeah,
and thanks
nice
for your
to
time
meet
today.
you. It was really fun.
appreciate
Oh, I
it.
probably should have put some wine out for you guys. That was crazy. Could have
Well, now
said.
you
We still got a few.
You can now,
Yeah,
exactly.
we should taste something.
Yes, of
Yeah.
course we should
And
taste
include that in the
something.
podcast. Because
Yes.
there has to be that taste moment, right?
Good point.
Yeah.
Hang on.
You're not going to be serving them the #1 top-rated spiced cider in all of Canada, are you, Jennifer? See, she's not even listening to me. Yeah, we're doing a radio moment, and you messed it up. Yeah, because when I was talking to you, that was me talking to you.
Like, really, really.
We can do it again. That's the beauty of editing.
Do cider too, it sort of seemed like it would take away from it, but
Right.
we've sort of brought it out of the closet now, and now we find people come here because sometimes, I hate to be stereotypical about it, but sometimes the woman in the family really loves her wines, and the
Yeah.
guy kind of doesn't. So now he's got cider to go to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Then while he's here, he finds out he really does like wine, and everything ends happily.
That's great.
So this is you right here. These are your interviews.
Yes.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
have been watching them. I'm like looking at you going, I know
This
guy.
one really, he's a friend of mine, Paul Hergott, and,
Right.
he puts forward the uncomfortable fact that all this Bluetooth talking we're doing on our phones is statistically just as dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
He's huge on that.
And no one wants to hear that, but so they're really all these nasty posts in the comment
Comments?
section.
Wow.
And he went through it and answered every single one of them, even the really nasty ones. He just went right there and said, well, colorful language, but
Yeah.
yada, yada, yada. And, he's amazing.
I used to live across the street from him, so yeah, I know his
Oh,
name a
did
little
you?
bit, so
He's
yeah.
very passionate.
He's very passionate. Yeah.
So you moved away then?
Yeah, that was when we were in Rose Meadow, and then I moved back into Kelowna. And
Okay. I'm just warming these up. Our cooler is very cold.
Okay.
So by the time people get their wine home, it'll be the perfect temperature. But for now,
It's also really a noisy old beast.
It's a bit
It's unfortunate to have it right beside the podcast.
Noisy.
It makes it
That's
sound
okay.
like you're in a place, right? You wanted
And
it.
we can filter it to the point where it's not like if you're listening in your car, you don't want it overpowering. Like what's
Right.
that buzzing? But a little bit of background will be okay.
Yeah.
So we can tweak that.
I can't wait to listen to your podcast, so I'll just watch.
Here's how to fun.
it's really cool.
Yes.
So guys, this is Gewürztraminer, but it has a proprietary name. We call it Revolution because it's quite revolutionary in style. Typically, Gewürztraminers are usually done in quite a sweet style with quite a bit of residual sugar. We also do that traditional style. We're sold out at the moment. But with this one, we're appealing to those folks that often would say, ooh, I don't want to try Gewürztraminer, it's way too sweet. And our winemakers wanted to show the world that Gewürztraminer doesn't have to be sweet. It's quite lovely as a drier wine. It's quite spicy.
Yeah.
It's
Love it.
50% aged in, fermented in oak, which is really different, which
Revolutionary.
is also revolutionary.
Hence the name.
Hence the name Revolution. And then when it's fermented in oak, there's a little bit of lees stirring in the barrel, and you can feel that on the mouthfeel. The mouthfeel is a little bit slippery, a little bit sort of just creamier mouthfeel.
She's a true sommelier. She spits.
What was the second thing?
She's
You
a
said?
true sommelier.
Yes,
Yeah.
and-
She spits.
Yes.
Oh, she spits.
I slurp and I spit. This
Slurps
doesn't
and
sound very
spits.
good, does it?
It doesn't, but they taste it. They spit it. They don't swallow. That's what. That way they don't
Yeah.
get drunk.
That's true.
Right.
I know. You still have to get something accomplished,
Yeah.
and you have to make decisions. I told you about the blending trials. You have to make actual
You have to
decisions and
decide.
write notes. And
It seems to me kind of like torture.
It
seems
seems like
wrong.
a waste. But
I know. I know.
Well, if you're not tasting a lot of wines, go ahead and swallow it. You know.
But if you're doing
Absolutely.
dozens and dozens.
Yeah.
Some of these people at some of these events where they're judging
the
wines.
judges, they judge. I mean, 100 wines sometimes.
I
It's crazy.
don't know how those guys can do that.
But it's true, I cannot drink wine without slurping because it just augments the experience so much. And I guess it's the teacher in me, but I love doing tastings with big groups and just teaching them stuff, you know, stuff that's sort of applicable and that you kind of use in your everyday life, like simple food pairings. But the first thing I always say is, guys, swirl your wine. And if you don't know how, practice it. Here, let's practice. Here, go. Ding, 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 and everyone chuckles and laughs. And, you know, I've had people say, oh, but I feel so pretentious when I do that. I'm like, no, you're not being pretentious. It looks a little bit pretentious, maybe, but actually you're really making the wine experience a much more positive thing. You're getting a little bit of oxygen in there.
Right?
It's a
They're
stereotype.
thinking it's all the wine snobs, and it's actually
Yes.
just opening up that wine. And
Yeah,
getting it some
that's
flavor.
exactly it. And then same thing, that, you know, slurping, that's a really fun one to especially get the women to do. They have a hard time with that. Like, oh, it's not very ladylike.
I was told I need to practice in the shower because then you
that's a
get
good
to practice
idea.
and you don't feel like you're
And if you dribble, it doesn't
It
matter.
doesn't matter. I haven't taken a bottle into the shower yet, but
You know, I think I haven't either.
Kara's studying for her WSET
Oh,
too.
good for you.
Yeah, I start next week.
Oh, that's so great. Who is your instructor?
Mike Lee.
Oh yeah, of course, he's great. You know, Kara, I should get you. I should somehow make you. Sorry, sweetie. I should make you my contact. But I would really love to send Mike Lee some Pinotage, BC Pinotage, and have your class try it because BC Pinotage is such a different beast from South Africa Pinotage.
Yes.
And I'll be honest, South Africa Pinotage it's got a bit of baggage. It's got some sort of. Some negative stereotypes about it, and I would really love to get some of the WSET instructors to start enlightening their students about our BC Pinotage. So you might be my contact.
All right. Sounds good.
So guys, this one's all about the pucker power.
It
so this
is.
is Riesling. Riesling tends to be a little bit more acidic, so balanced out by a little bit of residual sugar. It's known for its green apple, lime, citrus notes, and this is the one that you sip and your taste buds explode. So we call it juicy. It's very juicy in your mouth.
Yeah, love it.
This one was voted, I think, it was a gold in the Best of BC Wine Awards.
And it does have a little bit of minerality to it.
So we do a dry Riesling as well, which really tends to express the minerality. This one's a more traditional style with a bit of residual sugar. The drier one, you'll get it right away. On this one, you got to work on it a little bit. But imagine it has what's called a bit of a slate minerality. So a lot of people don't know what that means. So I like to think, imagine a hot summer day and you're down by a creek or a river and a little bit of rain maybe comes down. You know those weird afternoons where it's hot and then it rains?
Yep.
I think there's a name for that. Monkey's Picnic or something. And anyhow, the rain comes down on the hot rocks, and just imagine what that smells like. That's kind of that slate minerality. Or if you were a kid and you ever licked a rock. I don't know how many of us did that.
It's in the sauna, the old type of sauna where you throw water on the rocks
my
and get that smell.
gosh, that is a perfect analogy. Yes, that's a good one. There's a bit of that as well. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's that slate minerality, which is very typical of Riesling grown in our area. Our Riesling tends to have that, Tantalus does definitely, and that's when you know, okay, it's something to do with the soil up there, you know, and the aspect of the land, and yeah, so that's fun. Terroir-specific wines, and I get all
very
giddy
clear.
about. Yes,
They're very
they
clear
are
in glass.
clear and clean. It's true, yeah. So that's Riesling.
Nice.
I thought that you probably should try the Pinot Noir and Pinotage Reserve.
I think so too. Yeah. So the Pinotage Reserve is the one you tried the other day that you were like, I like this.
Oh, good. Okay. So, kind of fun, but for Halloween we do candy and wine pairings. So, if you like this, try with we'll do Pinotage first. Try the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup with the Pinotage. It's
my favorite.
It is an amazing
Chocolate.
pairing, you guys. It's so good. Pinotage has bright dark cherry and raspberry notes, but also has just a tiny bit of smokiness to it, a little bit of spice. So with the nuttiness and the chocolate, it's heaven. So Pinotage, as I think I mentioned to you earlier, is related to Pinot Noir. So its parentage, basically, its lineage is half Pinot Noir and then a French grape called Cinsault, But the South African that developed the grape in South Africa, they call Cinsault Hermitage. So this is how it got the name Pinotage. A lot of people get it mixed up with Meritage. They think it's a blend, like a Meritage blend, but no, it's actually a grape. Actually, is a varietal. So you get that little bit of smoky, nutty note on it, which is so great with the peanut butter. I'm really getting the spicy pepper notes on the finish today.
Yeah. So with the switching around, is it sort of like mouthwash? Is that what you're supposed to do?
In your mouth, you mean?
Yeah.
The swishing? So it actually, you're infusing oxygen into it, and it actually kind of changes the wine a little bit on a molecular level.
But is that what you're supposed to do? Like,
yes. Yeah. Not like, that would not, don't do that in a wine tasting.
But like
People would be
swishing
like,
around,
someone
like-
show this fellow out. But basically, let's see if I can do it. Hang on. So you're pulling oxygen kind of on the side of your lips.
right.
And it's
Back
sort of,
and forth.
Yeah, kind of back and forth, yeah.
Oh my God, this is awesome.
Isn't it amazing? It's the greatest pairing.
It's awesome, yeah.
You have to be a little more descriptive because it's audio.
Oh, right.
So a
Okay.
person's driving their car.
Right.
That's
So,
why I asked you that.
Imagine the peanut butter with wrapped
Don't
in
eat the
chocolate.
paper.
Don't eat the paper.
Don't eat the paper.
And, we try to be the approachable winery that is kind of fun and, not every day. We'd never call ourselves everyday winery, but we're just friendly and easygoing and approachable.
Okay, so
and
when you're pairing one of these little delights, do you like to say, eat the food and then have the wine, or the wine and then the food? Which order is?
I always get your palate going with a bit of wine first. Get the wine, cover your palate, sort of preparing it for the pairing, and
Then have a
a
nibble
little
of
nibble
your-
of the food, and then another sip of the wine. And that's usually when you go, whoa, wow, so great. It's a fun pairing. We like to have fun here.
Chocolate and wine.
Yes, yeah.
Well, we will also pair salt and vinegar chips with our Riesling, which
Yeah.
Yeah,
combine really nicely.
but typically, I think it's the teacher in me, but I like to do things where it's a learning moment. So with the Riesling, with the Miss Vicky's salt and malt vinegar chips, it is a learning moment, and you can take what you've learned from that and apply it to your own cooking and food pairing. So when you think about chips, Miss Vicky's salt and malt vinegar, they tend to be salty. Well, everyone knows how great lime and salt go together. If you've ever had a margarita, you know that, right? So Riesling tends to exhibit lime characteristics, so it's really great with anything salty. Riesling's also very acidic, so it tends to sort of match the acidity from the malt vinegar. So what I hope is that people try that and go, wow, oh my gosh, you are right. And then they take that home and use it in their own cooking. Yeah. So anything that's a little bit salty, savory, and has a bit of acidity is going to be amazing with Riesling. So that might be a savory, salty tomato sauce. It might be a balsamic reduction. We also talk about pork in Riesling because of the apple and pork. When you think of pork and applesauce, how delicious that is. Just try pork with Riesling, because Riesling also tends to have green apple notes on it, so it's delicious also. Yeah. I get really excited about food and wine
Way off
pairing.
topic. We still got Pinotage.
I know, sorry. So that is Pinotage.
That is Pinotage.
That's Pinotage. Okay, now let's try the Pinot Noir.
So this is new.
Yes, this is first vintage of our Pinot Noir, and so it's quite a new vintage. So when you are trying a new wine, it's going to be quite bright. It's going to be quite intense. The color's quite a bright ruby color.
So 2017 is when the grape was picked.
Correct, yes. So when you see a vintage on the wine, that's when the grapes were picked and pressed, processed. There you go.
Very different nose on that.
Yes. It's quite pretty. I get a lot of purple flower, sort of violet. Our Pinot Noir is quite feminine, I would say. It's not super light, though. It's got some great color.
Yeah.
But it's definitely got the really bright berry notes. Bit of cherry. Would you like to? Yeah.
You want me to bring it back?
I definitely get a bit of lavender on that. A little bit of spice.
The Pinot Noir is the one that a lot of wineries are really going to now. There was a time when Merlot was in favor. Now Pinot Noir seems to be, especially for this
in our area.
Yeah, for this particular part of the Okanagan Valley, Pinot Noir seems to be the one for reds.
I agree. I think as consumers become more sophisticated, that wineries are starting to more and more emphasize terroir and wines that are specific to their terroir. And so gone are the days where, well, we have a Cabernet Sauvignon and we have a Malbec, but we also have a Riesling and a Chardonnay, and it's just like a huge portfolio. A lot of us are dialing in a little bit more to, varieties that grow really well in your area. And that is Pinot Noir, for sure, for this area. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
It's definitely more intense when you swish it around in your mouth.
And part of that is because the vintage of Pinotage that you just tried was 2016, so it's had a bit of aging time. Right. So when a wine ages, typically the tannins mellow a little bit. Everything just the edges aren't quite as rough. A newer wine, a younger wine, will typically be quite sort of in your face, which can be lovely, but for some people, they find it maybe too aggressive. Yeah. They kind of want it to mellow a bit.
There's also a little geography on your tongue, too, right? Where the different parts of your tongue have the different sorts of taste buds. So you want it really...
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So just as a little dessert, we're going to have cider as a dessert. And I'm pouring for you one that we're really proud of. This one just won Best Cider in this double gold in the Canadian Cider Awards.
For the spiced ciders.
It's a spiced cider, and we have developed it so that you can have it hot or cold. Oh, cool. So you can warm this one up on the stove. You can warm it up in the pot over the fire if you're really into that. I sometimes just put it in a mug in the microwave.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
There you go. Pop a little cinnamon stick in there, and it's delicious. Lovely. So the nice thing about making cider out of real cider apples, so we grow the real cider apples, is they have quite a high acidity. So even in a cider like this that has quite a bit of residual sugar and it's got all the spice going on, it's still really nicely balanced with that nice acidity. So it's still crisp and fresh. It's not a cloying sort of really overly sweet experience.
It's got a wonderful smell to it. This one.
The really spices with the apple is amazing. It's kind of like walking in and when my Nana used to make a whole bunch of pies, and my mom would make pies, it's kind of that same smell.
That's what it reminds me of.
Yeah,
exactly.
Apple pies,
cinnamon, nutmeg.
Yeah.
So when you heat it up, it obviously doesn't have the bubbles in it. The bubbles kind of off gas. You don't want to heat it up too much because you don't want to boil the alcohol off. Just heat it up warm enough to sort of drink, but don't boil it. Yeah.
And this label you see, we'll have to paint a picture for your audio people listening here, but we have seen this in a few years where there's been some snow on the bins of apples before we're able to get them into the big old belt press.
Last year, for instance, we still had an entire block unpicked when that early snowstorm hit on November 1st, so that was pretty
horrible,
horrifying.
And it better not happen again.
Well, that's one of the reasons Frostbite, the new release for us, is called Frostbite, because we actually harvested those apples in the snowstorm.
In a kind of a panic. So
in a panic.
We were.
So you've got a time limit when it starts freezing. Is that
they were going to be. They're going to fall off the tree and get buried in the snow.
And just hard to pick, unpleasant to pick.
Right. Like digging through snow.
We literally were digging through snow. It was terrible. But anyhow, made a great cider. So that's Picker's Hut, and it's a painted bottle. You notice in the tiny, tiny little print on the tree, it says "I Heart Cider."
Oh, that's a beautiful label. Who designed
isn't
the
it?
label?
We did.
On a napkin.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
And then.
Yeah, Kent's really artistic.
It's got a very wintry Christmas feel.
It does. Yeah, it's fun. Anyhow, so those are some of our babies.
That's awesome.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about your ciders before today, so it was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah. It is.
So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This is going to be close to an hour, which is great.
Okay.
I think it'll be a record. So the longest was
does
the
anyone? Do you guys know who listens to them? Like, do they? Does someone actually listen for an hour?
Locations.
Yes.
They don't tell you the person, but they can tell you male, female. They can tell you iPhone, Android, city, province, country. So we've got a handful in England. Most are in Kelowna.
Wow, that's so neat.
Second most is Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton.
Wow.
There's quite a few listeners there. So yeah.
I wonder who they are. It'd be so interesting to know.
As of today, we've got about 70 unique listeners per episode. And if you listen on various devices, it only counts once.
Yes.
So it kind of tracks you.
Yeah.
So if you're listening at home on your iPad, then you go in your car,
Right, you're not
It
two
won't
people.
count as twice.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So 70, goal is to have 100 by Christmas and 1,000 by next summer, which will be the 1 year anniversary.
Right.
So,
oh my gosh, it's so cool, you guys.
It's a lot of fun. We've had 79 great conversations now.
Have you
and
become
counting.
friends with any of the people that you've interviewed? Like, do you kind of go, you know what, we need to hang out with those guys?
Started with our friends.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
fun.
then you interviewed a lot of our mutual friends, and Stephen and Laura were
Oh,
one
yeah.
of the couple of the first
Yeah.
ones, and then
So Stephen and Laura were good friends with Kara and other friends of mine.
Yeah.
So I knew them. I met them at parties, but never had a conversation really.
Yeah.
You know, parties can be a little bit superficial. You're just like, I
It's
don't
so
know what you do, where
loud
you're
and
from.
hard to really
Yeah.
talk
You
for
know.
real.
So
Okay, I feel like these two should come with us to the Bond party. Because you look like, what's the evil guy, the bald guy?
Dr. Evil.
Dr. Evil.
Totally!
He looks like, you just said he looks like Dr. Evil.
Well, in a good way.
Evil's pretty
In
cool,
a good way. He's cool. Yeah.
We will get one.
We could get you a white cat,
Yeah.
and you totally
I
pull
love
off
cats.
glamorous, beautiful Bond woman.
thanks.
Seriously, have you guys heard about this event?
No.
No.
If you want to come, we would love for you to join us.
When
But
is it?
That would be
it's
awesome.
November 10th.
Oh, cool.
It's a Saturday. And do you know Anna Jackson?
No. not yet.
She'd be a
She's
really
an
interesting
amazing
person
singer.
to talk to as well. She would be amazing to talk to. I almost feel like I should
She's more
nominate
amazing
her.
to listen to sing.
True, but her story is interesting. She's a little girl that grew up in Kelowna and then went to somehow made it to voice school in England.
Wow.
Like last night, she was telling me that when she was in England, she was sitting on this stage somewhere and she looked over and there was Bono and REM standing right there, chit-chatting away.
That's
But
so
anyhow,
awesome.
she's now she's a local performer and
Yes, I have seen her posts. I've seen her.
I mean, she's so talented.
She sang last night at this red dress
Yes.
Yeah.
gala, and
And anyhow, she's singing Bond songs, all songs from James Bond movies.
gosh.
Her band, 6-piece band, at this event, and it's at the Forum. And
What's her name?
her name is Anna Jackson.
Anna Jackson.
Yeah, and she, if you saw Mamma Mia this summer,
Yeah,
she
we didn't
was.
get to
Oh,
see
too
it.
bad it was so good. Can
So
we?
much good.
I love to send guests away with a bottle of wine. Can I send you with? Was there anything that you loved that you'd like to take home?
The first one was my favorite.
The Revolution was. What
Yeah.
about you, Tara?
Do you agree?
You get one each. You get one each. You
I
don't
love the
have
cider.
to.
That was
Okay.
awesome.
Okay.
Oh, perfect.
All right.
Luke Mankus is a realtor. He loves what he does. We asked Luke if he had any regrets about moving here in 2011, and he always says, yeah, one regret, and that is he didn't move here sooner. When Luke came here, he didn't know anyone. He didn't know the neighborhoods or anything or anyone besides his daughter, who was 6 years old at the time. So he knows what it's like. Now, he's an expert and has helped well over 100 single people, couples, families, and investors with their real estate needs in the Okanagan. If you're new to our beautiful city, Luke can help you get connected with great lawyers, dentists, carpenters, landscapers, swimming pool installers, you name it. And whether you're new to Kelowna or not, Luke knows real estate. He can help you find a great property, negotiate a good deal, and hold your hand all the way through the process until the day you get your shiny new set of keys. Luke is known as a no-pressure kind of guy. He's had clients where it took even a year or more to get them into a property. He just doesn't believe in rushing things. On the other hand, when you decide it's time to act, he's diligent and he'll work day and night until the job is done. Give Luke Mankus a call or a text message at any time. 778-215-4273. Again, that's 778-215-4273. 778-215-4273 to chat with Luke about real estate.